Hello and welcome to my video, where I'm going to show you how to make a miniature 1/12 scale bed and mattress. This is a fun project and anyone can give it a go because I won't be using any difficult techniques. The first thing I'll show you is how to make the wooden bed frame and then how to make the foam mattress. In order to follow along with this, you're going to need these items. With regards to the wood, I used a 5x5mm square stick and also a sheet of basswood that was 1/16 of an inch or about 2mm thick. If you can't find basswood, then obeche is also a good choice. Note that if you use a slightly thicker wood sheet, for instance 2.5mm thick, then just bear in mind that the size of a couple of the bed parts might need to be altered. Then with regards to the foam, I wouldn't recommend using anything thinner than 1/2 inch, and for the lightweight fabric, I would recommend a woven cotton. Right, so the first step in this kind of project is always to plan the design. Obviously, if you just want to use my design, then that's totally fine and you can skip this step. However, if you want to design your own, I'm going to quickly run through how I did it. I was aiming to replicate my own double bed, so obviously my plans are based on that particular bed shape and size. Therefore, the first thing I needed to do was measure all of the different parts of the bed. You can see on the right side of this paper my diagrams and the full-size measurements in centimetres. In order to make these 1/12 scale, I then had to divide all of the measurements by 12. And you can see on the left side of the paper my diagrams, but this time with the 1/12 scale measurements. If you're designing a bed from scratch, then you'll need to estimate these sizes, and you can use average bed sizes to help you. From here, I worked out a plan of all the different pieces I would need. Remember that you can simplify the design or amend it how you like as you go along. The first thing I did was make sure I rounded up or down the numbers to the nearest millimetre. I then cut the number of slats from 11 down to 8, and I also added ends onto the mattress frame so I'll have more surface area to glue the frame to the head and footboards. Just make sure you're thinking about how the bed will go together as you're making the design. Next, you can work out the size of all the parts you'll need and what thicknesses of wood you'll use. I already had 4 pieces of wood in my stash, and I chose to use 2 of these for all of the sections. And lastly, you'll need to work out the spacing between any evenly spaced parts. So in my case, that's the mattress rungs and the slats. Make sure you double check your measurements and maybe even draw a scale diagram to be certain that everything works before you cut the pieces. Note that I'll be giving you the revised edition of the cutting list in the next step, as I have made a couple of changes. Right, so the next step is to cut out the wood pieces, and here is the cutting list. There are 46 pieces to cut out overall. As I mentioned before, this cutting list has been slightly revised, and you might notice that one end of my mattress frame is a little bit wider than yours, and you'll see me rectifying this later on. In order to cut the wood sheet, you need to first draw the outline with pencil. Then place a metal ruler along the line and cut the wood with a craft knife. Make sure you've got a new blade in your knife. It took me 4 or so slices to get all of the way through the wood, and it was a bit tougher to cut across the grain at the ends of the strips. Please note that the grain of the wood must be parallel to the longest length of any piece, i.e. the grain must run lengthwise along all of the strips. This just makes the pieces much less likely to snap. Also make sure you measure, mark and cut the pieces one at a time. The reason for this is that if you mark all of the strips next to each other and then cut them all out, you aren't taking the width of the cut into account. So mark and cut each piece one after the other, however tempting it is to shortcut this process. As you go along, I would definitely recommend that you group the strips together and also label them with a pencil. In order to cut the wood stick, you first need to measure and mark the point where you want to cut. Then place it in the mitre block and use the razor saw to cut through it at 90 degrees. As you might be able to see, it only took a few pulls of the saw to cut through. Once you've cut out all of the wood pieces, you just need to use some fairly fine sandpaper to smooth all of the edges. Just make sure that when you're sanding, you keep the edges square and you don't angle them. Of course, always remember to wear a dust mask when sanding. It's also very important to make sure that all of the pieces that need to be the same length are exactly the same length. At this scale, a millimetre out and it will be visible. Once you've finished sanding, make sure you wipe off all of the sawdust and also use an eraser to remove the pencil marks. Keep the wood pieces grouped together though, so you still know which is which. Then take the sides and ends of the mattress frame and glue them together with wood glue. As I mentioned previously, one of your end pieces will be narrower than what you see here. Make sure that the end pieces fit in between the longer side pieces. And also make sure that the corners are right angles. Whilst that's drying, we can glue together the headboard and then the footboard. You need to begin by laying a piece of masking tape onto your non-stick mat, like so, and making sure this is at least as long as your headboard. Then mark a vertical line onto the tape at the left side and measure out where each of the slats will need to be. In my case, the gap at each side of the headboard will be 5 mm, but the rest of the gaps will be 8 mm. For the headboard, glue together the two longer corner posts and the most narrow horizontal rung piece, making sure that they fit flush at the top. Then glue on all of the slats using the tape as your guide. Try and keep the slats perfectly vertical. Then glue on the two other horizontal rung pieces, one directly below the slats and one 19 mm from the bottom of the long posts. Remove excess glue if you can. For the footboard, you do the same, except you use the shorter corner posts and the shorter slats. You also only attach 2 horizontal rungs. Remove the excess glue if you can, and then leave these to dry. Next, glue the mattress supports inside the long edges of the mattress frame. They should lie flat on the non-stick mat below. Once those are stable, you can then make another masking tape guide, but this time for the mattress rungs. In my case, the gap at each end needs to be 3 mm, and all of the other gaps need to be 6 mm. Then line up the frame on top of the tape and glue the rungs in place. They should be evenly spaced all of the way along. I also just had to fix the fact that one end of my mattress frame was too wide, so I used a craft knife, a ruler and a saw just to take out a section. Obviously, you won't need to do this. Once everything is dry, you'll need to sand all of the pieces to make sure everything is nice and neat and flat where it needs to be flat. I also chose to round the corners of the pieces that will go on top of the headboard and the footboard. To do this, I just dragged the wooden pieces across the sandpaper like so, making sure that I sanded equally in each corner. Once you've done that, just make sure you wipe off all of the wood dust. Now it's time to glue the headboard and footboard to the mattress frame. Make sure when you do this that the mattress frame is the same distance off the floor at each end and each side of the bed. After all, you want a perfectly level bed. And then the last step is to glue the rounded wood pieces on top of each end, making sure that they're centered. And then it's time to make the mattress. So mark out a rectangle on thin card that's 2mm narrower and 2mm shorter than the space inside the mattress frame. For me, this is 154 by 106mm. Then cut out this template and glue it onto your foam. To do this, I just used UHU all-purpose adhesive. Then use scissors to cut around this template. Make sure you're cutting straight up and down, and use small cutting motions to help you get a nice neat line. Then place this mattress on top of a piece of fabric so the back of the fabric is facing up. Trim the fabric down so there's a couple of inches of fabric on each side of the mattress. Mark each corner of the mattress very lightly with a pencil. Then make 2 cuts towards this pencil mark at each corner so that you're cutting out square shapes. Then bring together the 2 cut edges at one corner, making sure that the right sides of the fabric are facing each other. Then backstitch along this edge for a distance that equals the thickness of the foam mattress. In my case, that's about 15mm. If you don't know how to do backstitch, don't worry, I have a video all about it. And here you can see the finish line of stitches. You then just need to repeat this at the other corners as well. Once you've done that, turn the cover right side out and place the mattress inside. Use your scissors to cut away some of the excess fabric where it overlaps at the corners. Then glue the remaining fabric flaps to the mattress. Make sure you don't wrap too tightly because you don't want to distort the foam. The next step is the optional step of adding some subtle tufting to the mattress. To do this, just take a needle and thread from the back of the mattress to the front. And then back again to make a tiny stitch. Then tie the thread ends together in a knot. If you want more dramatic tufting, just pull the thread ends tighter before knotting. Then just repeat this as many times as you wish. And here you can see the result of that tufting. Lastly, you can add another rectangle of fabric to the underside of the mattress to neaten it up. So cut out a rectangle of fabric about 10mm wider and 10mm longer than you want the finished piece to be. Then iron over 5mm of fabric on each edge. Cut a square out of each corner to remove the excess fabric. Then simply add glue along the folded over hems and press it down on the back of the mattress. Then leave it to dry. And that's it, the bed and the mattress are now complete. Obviously, if you want to, you can then finish the bed frame with some paint or varnish or stain. I really hope you enjoyed this project and thank you very much for watching.